What does Neville Goddard truly mean when he says wealth begins in the imagination? And how can understanding this secret completely change the way you experience money, success, and freedom in your own life? In this video, I will reveal how Neville's timeless method of inner creation can transform financial limitation into abundance, how feeling is the gateway to unseen riches, and how imagination, when disciplined and trusted, becomes the very hand of creation itself. By the end, you'll understand why your outer world is only a mirror of your inner assumptions, and how to awaken the same power Neville used to manifest wealth from nothing. This is where it begins. The quiet moment when you realize the law of imagination is not a philosophy, but a living force breathing through every image you hold as true. This is how it unfolds. As you learn that money does not appear because you work harder, but because you assume a state that commands reality to reorganize itself around your belief. This is where truth breaks through, when you stop looking to the world to give you wealth and start seeing yourself as the source of it. This is why it matters, because every financial struggle you've ever faced has never been against the world, but against your own forgotten power to imagine differently. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that you must earn worthiness before you receive, that wealth is something given only to a chosen few. This is the turning point, when you finally see that every rich man first imagined himself so before any coin appeared. This is how creation truly works, not by force but by assumption, not by waiting but by feeling it real now. This is the moment of alignment, when imagination and faith merge, and the outer world must obey the image within. This is where the invisible seed is planted, the thought impregnated with conviction that grows into tangible wealth. This is the beginning of mastery, recognizing that what you feel now determines what you will soon hold. This is how wealth reveals its true nature, as a reflection of your sustained emotional state, not a random blessing from fate. This is where the law whispers its first truth, that to imagine is to create, and to persist is to possess. This is where resistance dies, when you stop reacting to appearances and start creating them. This is how your new story begins, with a single assumption felt so vividly it becomes unavoidable fact. This is the inner alchemy Neville spoke of, turning invisible thought into visible form through feeling. This is how the unseen becomes seen, through disciplined imagination fused with emotion. This is where the journey starts, not with striving, but with stillness, where you dare to believe that your mind is the workshop of God. And this is the promise, that once you awaken to this truth, you will never again chase wealth, because you will know that you are its eternal source and sustainer. Can you imagine discovering that every dollar you have ever gained or lost was never about luck, economy, or circumstance, but about the silent images you have held within? This is where Neville Goddard pulls back the veil and shows that all money, all transactions, and all opportunities are shadows cast by the inner movie you play in the theater of your mind. This is where it begins, with the startling realization that nothing comes to you except by the state of consciousness you occupy. This is how it unfolds. Each thought of lack, each feeling of insufficiency, each unspoken belief that money is hard to get, quietly imprints the universe with a command it cannot disobey. This is where truth breaks through, when you see that the true currency of wealth is imagination fused with conviction, not paper or numbers on a screen. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that the outer world has power over your income, your success, or your destiny. This is why it matters, because once you accept that cause is internal, you regain the creative power you unknowingly gave away to circumstances. This is the turning point, when you stop asking, "How will it happen?" and start declaring, "It is already done." This is how wealth begins to flow, quietly at first, through subtle coincidences, inspired actions, and new opportunities that seem to appear out of nowhere. This is where your faith is tested, not in comfort, but in persistence, as you continue to imagine abundance even when your senses deny it. This is the hidden workshop of creation, your consciousness crafting the structure before the world delivers the materials. This is how you break free from the mental prison of scarcity thinking that has chained generations to effort and fear. This is where you begin to understand Neville's law, that to change your world, you must first change your inner conversation about money. This is the invisible transaction, where belief purchases experience and imagination deposits reality into your account. This is where wealth begins to answer you through new ideas, unexpected gifts, and alignments that no logic can predict. This is how truth feels: light, certain, and unbothered by appearances, because the seed of wealth is already planted within. This is where old stories dissolve, when you stop repeating tales of struggle and start telling the story of fulfillment. This is where creation happens in silence, before anyone else sees, before the bank reflects it, before the world agrees. This is how you reclaim authorship, by deciding that your imagination, not circumstance, writes every check of your life. And this is the moment you realize that behind every dollar ever earned or lost stands one cause only: your own state of consciousness, creating endlessly in the unseen. Picture for a moment the exact moment when Neville Goddard revealed that imagination alone is not enough, that only when you feel your desire as real does creation truly begin to move. This is where the mystery deepens, because it's not about thinking of wealth but from wealth, entering the emotional atmosphere of having rather than wanting. This is where it begins, when thought becomes alive with emotion, when the invisible dream starts to pulse with the rhythm of certainty. This is how it unfolds. Your inner senses begin to rearrange themselves, and your world, obedient to the vibration of feeling, starts to mirror the conviction of your heart. This is where truth breaks through, that your emotions are creative instructions, not reactions, commanding life to produce whatever matches their frequency. This is why it matters, because many people imagine riches but still feel poor, and the universe can only echo the feeling, not the wish. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that effort alone creates wealth, when in truth, emotion is the real labor of creation. This is the turning point, when you stop begging for results and start embodying the satisfaction of having received. This is how it feels: light, grounded, calm, as though the work were already done. This is where the inner and outer worlds fuse, where your heartbeat aligns with the unseen current of fulfillment. This is how wealth becomes inevitable, because what you sustain in feeling must eventually crystallize in form. This is the sacred rehearsal, living your desired reality inwardly until it cannot help but materialize outwardly. This is where doubt dissolves, not because of proof, but because you are emotionally convinced. This is how you become magnetic. Your calm certainty pulls to you all conditions necessary for your vision's expression. This is where your energy changes. The face softens, the breath steadies, and gratitude precedes evidence. This is how imagination graduates into creation, when you stop daydreaming and start feeling the truth of your desire. This is where Neville's wisdom strikes gold, that the secret to wealth is not to chase the thing, but to feel the state of already having it. This is the quiet revolution, realizing that emotion, not logic, shapes destiny. This is where the process becomes effortless, because you no longer push, you allow. And this is the moment you understand why Neville said, "Feeling is the secret." For in the silence of certainty, the world rearranges itself to obey your inner state. Now consider this: the invisible path that connects your imagined wealth to its physical expression, the mysterious chain of events Neville Goddard called the bridge of incidents. This is where the unseen begins to translate into the seen, weaving together moments, meetings, and opportunities that seem accidental, but are actually ordered by your assumption. This is where it begins, right after you have felt it real, when your desire starts to move through the world in ways your conscious mind cannot predict. This is how it unfolds: an unexpected call, a sudden idea, a delayed plan that turns out to be perfect timing, all aligning with the inner picture you have chosen. This is where truth breaks through, that your only task is to remain faithful to the end you have imagined, while life orchestrates the how. This is why it matters, because impatience makes many abandon the bridge before they reach the other side, mistaking divine movement for delay. This is where illusion fades. The illusion that nothing is happening, when in truth, everything is being rearranged behind the curtain of time. This is the turning point, when you realize that coincidences are simply the footprints of your assumption walking across reality. This is how faith is tested, Because the bridge rarely looks like the destination. It often looks like chaos just before order emerges. This is where surrender becomes strength. Trusting that each event, whether pleasant or not, is carrying you closer to fulfillment. This is how creation feels from within, calm expectancy mixed with awe, as you sense that unseen hands are guiding the sequence. This is where Neville's genius shines, teaching that you need not manipulate circumstances, only persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is how you become untouchable, immune to doubt, because you understand that the process is unfolding perfectly, even when unseen. This is where the bridge teaches patience, that divine timing is precision, not procrastination. This is how destiny becomes predictable, when you realize that the outer world must follow the blueprint of your inner conviction. This is where gratitude becomes your compass. Each event, whether strange or simple, acknowledged as part of the unfolding miracle. This is how your confidence grows, not because you see everything, but because you trust the invisible architect within. This is where the story of your wealth takes shape, brick by brick, conversation by conversation, one aligned moment at a time. This is how the law rewards faithfulness, by turning imagination into evidence and feeling into fact. And this is the moment you finally understand that every bridge, no matter how winding, was built by your own assumption, and every step upon it is leading you unfailingly to the wealth you already claimed within. Suppose you discover that the true secret behind Neville Goddard's wealth manifestations lies not in waiting for miracles, but in assuming them into existence. This is where the principle comes alive, not as theory, but as the daily art of living, as though your desire were already fulfilled. This is where it begins, when you stop asking if it will happen and begin declaring it already has. This is how it unfolds. Each assumption becomes a command, quietly instructing the universe to rearrange itself in obedience to your inner certainty. This is where truth breaks through, that life does not respond to effort or prayer alone, but to the tone of being you consistently occupy. This is why it matters, because to assume wealth is to set into motion a law that cannot fail unless you undo it through disbelief. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that assumption is pretending, when in truth it is creation in motion. This is the turning point, when you stop rehearsing limitation and begin practicing fulfillment as your natural identity. This is how the invisible takes form, through sustained conviction, through living each day from the feeling of already possessing what once seemed distant. This is where imagination becomes fact, because assumption is faith clothed in emotional certainty. This is how you move unseen forces. Your tone of confidence reshapes events, and people respond in ways that match your inner claim. This is where you begin to witness miracles, money appearing in unexpected places, help arriving at just the right moment, doors opening that logic said were locked. This is how the law proves itself, by showing that reality is pliable, bending to the weight of your sustained belief. This is where your power stabilizes, not in constant affirmations, but in quiet knowing that it is already done. This is how Neville lived, not by hoping, but by being, by walking each day as the man who already had his desire. This is where creation becomes effortless, because assumption no longer feels like work, but like truth unfolding naturally. This is how the student becomes the master, by assuming inwardly, allowing outwardly, and knowing deeply that both are one. This is where your energy changes. People feel it, circumstances bend to it, and the world quietly agrees with your claim. This is how wealth begins to surround you, not because it suddenly appeared, but because it was there all along, waiting for recognition. And this is the moment you realize that the law of assumption is not about forcing reality. It is about remembering who you already are. The one whose inner word becomes flesh, whose imagination commands, and whose belief writes the script of life itself. Envision a world where wealth is not something you chase, but a frequency you live in. A quiet atmosphere of certainty that Neville Goddard called the state of consciousness of wealth. This is where the illusion of separation ends, because wealth is not a thing to get, it is a state to enter. This is where it begins, when you stop defining yourself by what you have and start identifying with what you are. This is how it unfolds. Your inner dialogue shifts, your emotions stabilize, and your imagination begins to feel at home in abundance. This is where truth breaks through. That consciousness is the only reality, and what you are conscious of being must eventually appear in your world. This is why it matters. Because no matter how much you work or strive, if your inner self feels poor, life will echo that feeling with precision. This is where illusion fades. The illusion that circumstances determine consciousness, when in truth, consciousness determines circumstance. This is the turning point, when you realize that having follows being, and being begins within. This is how wealth becomes effortless, when you mentally rest in the feeling that you already possess what you once longed for. This is where gratitude replaces worry, because you are no longer asking, you are acknowledging. This is how the energy of sufficiency feels, light, complete, calm, as if the future has already paid its debt to you. This is where the outer world softens. People respond differently. Opportunities find you, and money becomes a natural extension of your vibration. This is how you rise beyond struggle, by aligning your inner state with the frequency of fulfillment, not the echo of lack. This is where creation becomes normal, because you no longer treat manifestation as magic, but as the natural expression of being. This is how Neville lived, anchored in the inner conviction that he already was what he sought to become. This is where the invisible kingdom reveals itself, every thought of wealth translating into visible supply. This is how the wise rest, in knowing that consciousness precedes all form, and rest itself is the highest act of faith. This is where doubt can't survive, because you're no longer looking outward for proof, you're radiating the proof from within. This is how the inner sun rises, the awareness that you are wealth, not its seeker. And this is the moment you finally grasp Neville's truth. That to change your bank account, you must first change your state of being, for the world faithfully mirrors the riches of the consciousness you dare to inhabit. Think of the moment when everything changes, not because the world has shifted yet, but because you have. The precise instant Neville Goddard described as the turning point of belief. This is where your inner certainty becomes stronger than appearances, where your conviction outweighs evidence, and where invisible power begins to stir behind the scenes. This is where it begins, the quiet decision that you will never again argue for your limitations, no matter how convincing they appear. This is how it unfolds. Each time you feel doubt rise, you replace it with the knowing that imagination is reality in motion. This is where truth breaks through, that belief is not wishful thinking, but creative law, an act of divine authority clothed in human faith. This is why it matters, because the moment you believe, the outcome is no longer uncertain. It is already sealed in consciousness. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that you must wait to see before believing, when in truth, belief is the very cause of seeing. This is the turning point, when faith stops being a theory and becomes your only logic. This is how transformation happens, not by evidence convincing you, but by your conviction commanding evidence to appear. This is where your inner climate shifts, from hoping to knowing, from striving to resting. This is how wealth begins to take form, quietly, predictably, following the rhythm of your unwavering belief. This is where the world begins to bend. People, events, and timing all start to align with the new frequency of your certainty. This is how the unseen becomes tangible, because belief is the bridge between imagination and manifestation. This is where fear loses its grip, since you understand that nothing can oppose a mind that has accepted its vision as fact. This is how faith feels, calm, grounded, powerful, and immune to contradiction. This is where miracles become natural, because your new belief has rewritten what reality is allowed to be. This is how Neville taught his students to persist in belief even when all senses deny it, for persistence is proof of mastery. This is where you claim dominion by refusing to serve appearances and instead commanding them to reflect your inner decree. This is how the law rewards courage, by revealing that every external limitation was only waiting for your inner permission to dissolve. And this is the moment you realize the real turning point is not when wealth appears, but when you finally believe, beyond reason, that it already belongs to you. Ask yourself what happens when you finally listen to the quiet words you speak to yourself each day. The unspoken inner conversations that Neville Goddard said are constantly shaping your wealth, your opportunities, and your destiny. This is where the story turns inward, revealing that every thought is dialogue, and every dialogue is creation in progress. This is where it begins, when you recognize that your inner speech, more than your actions, is the architect of your reality. This is how it unfolds. Each word you whisper in imagination becomes a seed that grows into outer circumstance, whether of lack or abundance. This is where truth breaks through, that no prayer is more powerful than the conversation you repeat silently when no one is listening. This is why it matters, because you may speak of prosperity aloud, yet within, rehearse poverty in the language of worry, doubt, and fear. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that thinking positively for a few minutes can erase hours of mental complaint. This is the turning point, when you decide to make every inner sentence agree with your vision, not your circumstances. This is how transformation begins, when you replace "I can't afford it" with "it always works out for me," until the new pattern feels natural. This is where the unseen world takes notice, because the tone of your inner dialogue is the vibration to which the universe responds. This is how wealth starts whispering back, through new ideas, confident actions, and effortless attraction of support. This is where doubt weakens, because the old inner voices lose their authority in the presence of a consistent new narrative. This is how Neville trained his mind, by rewriting his inner talk until it only spoke the language of fulfillment. This is where power returns, when you stop arguing with appearances and start conversing with possibility. This is how reality bends, subtly at first, as though listening in on your rehearsed words and obeying their emotional intent. This is where creation becomes constant, because every silent statement becomes an order to the invisible. This is how you cultivate prosperity, not through struggle, but through disciplined conversation with yourself. This is where gratitude becomes your dialect, your mind learning to speak abundance fluently until lack sounds foreign. This is how you awaken to mastery, by realizing that your inner world is the microphone, and the universe is always recording. And this is the moment you understand Neville's promise, that when your inner conversation matches the wealth you seek, the outer world cannot help but echo it in living color. Consider the possibility that every moment of regret, failure, or financial disappointment in your past can be rewritten, reimagined, and redeemed, as Neville Goddard taught through his technique of revision. This is where the unseen law of cause reveals its secret. By altering the memory, you alter the future that was waiting to grow from it. This is where it begins, when you consciously go back and relive past experiences, not as they happened, but as you wish they had happened. This is how it unfolds. Every imagined correction replaces old emotional imprints with new patterns of possibility, reshaping destiny silently, yet powerfully. This is where truth breaks through, that the past only has authority if you let it, and its grip loosens the moment you rewrite it in consciousness. This is why it matters, because unresolved memories of lack and limitation continue to echo in the present until they are transformed. This is where illusion fades. The illusion that you are bound by yesterday's failures, when in truth, the only limit is your imagination. This is the turning point, when you understand that your power is not just in assuming the future, but in revising the past that anchors doubt. This is how wealth emerges, through the quiet act of mental renewal, where every corrected image strengthens the bridge to abundance. This is where faith becomes visible, because revision generates a new internal precedent that the world must follow. This is how the mind becomes your ally, turning regret into rehearsal, mistakes into lessons, and old debts into invisible credit. This is where Neville's technique works silently. Your inner revisions ripple outward, adjusting circumstances without effort or force. This is how limitation dissolves, when the inner record no longer contains proof of scarcity or failure. This is where creation accelerates, because a past rewritten harmonizes all present opportunities toward fulfillment. This is how you free yourself, by understanding that each imagined correction strengthens your claim to the life you desire. This is where mastery is cultivated. Discipline in the imagination, reshaping your reality before the senses can contradict it. This is how confidence grows, every revision reinforcing the certainty of what is already yours. This is where miracles are seeded, events, people, and circumstances realigning in perfect response to your inner renewal. This is how Neville's wisdom transforms you, turning memory into a workshop of possibility rather than a cage of limitation. And this is the moment you realize that your past is only as powerful as you allow it to be. And through conscious revision, every financial or personal setback becomes the fertile ground for your future wealth. Envision a life where you no longer chase wealth, struggle for opportunity, or plead with circumstance, but simply live in the reality of already having it, as Neville Goddard taught. This is where the transformation becomes unmistakable, the moment desire turns into possession, and seeking becomes being. This is where it begins, when you stop measuring your value by what you lack, and start identifying with the state of fulfillment you wish to embody. This is how it unfolds. Your inner world settles into satisfaction, your emotions align with abundance, and the outer world begins to mirror this effortless certainty. This is where truth breaks through, that wanting is a signal of absence, but feeling as if you already have it is the command that sets manifestation into motion. This is why it matters, because countless people work, strive, and hope for what they desire, never realizing that the energy of lack only attracts more lack. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that effort or striving produces results, when in fact the shift from wanting to having is purely a state of consciousness. This is the turning point, when you cease to beg and start to live in the quiet authority of the fulfilled state. This is how wealth becomes inevitable, because the mind no longer resists, doubts, or hesitates. It simply is the state of its desire. This is where Neville's secret comes alive, through the psychological act of living as if the wish is already a present reality. This is how the inner world commands the outer, when every feeling, thought, and gesture resonates with the certainty of already possessing what you once longed for. This is where confidence solidifies, the internal knowing that the law of imagination cannot fail when your state is unwavering. This is how momentum grows. The world conspires to complete the reality your consciousness has claimed. This is where fear dissipates, because being eliminates the vacuum where worry once thrived. This is how manifestation accelerates. Opportunities, people, and events flow to match the frequency of your assumed state. This is where gratitude anchors you, because feeling as if it is already done cultivates the joy that draws more of the same. This is how inner peace becomes your constant companion, absence and desire replaced by certainty and presence. This is where the law of assumption operates flawlessly. The moment you are the person who already possesses the wealth, all else is inevitable. This is how Neville's teaching guides you, to shift from wanting to having, to cease chasing and start inhabiting, and to allow the world to reflect the inner state you now claim. And this is the moment you realize that to live as if is not fantasy, but the very act of creating reality itself, with nothing left to wait for and everything already given. Ask yourself what happens when you surrender entirely to the unseen force that Neville Goddard described as the invisible hand of faith, the quiet current that guides every manifestation toward completion. This is where trust transcends effort, because faith acts without resistance and operates beyond the scrutiny of the senses. This is where it begins, when you stop forcing results and start allowing the unseen to orchestrate events in perfect alignment with your inner state. This is how it unfolds. Subtle clues, chance meetings, and seemingly random circumstances begin to align, forming a seamless path that reflects the certainty of your assumption. This is where truth breaks through. Faith is not belief in the improbable, but confidence in what has already been assumed in consciousness. This is why it matters, because impatience and doubt often interrupt the flow, causing delay or misalignment despite correct inner work. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that results depend on your labor or timing, when in fact, the universe is constantly moving to fulfill your state of being. This is the turning point, when you realize that letting go is not passive resignation, but active participation in the unseen law. This is how wealth manifests effortlessly, through consistent trust that the images held in imagination will materialize in due course. This is where patience becomes a powerful ally, each day of quiet faith amplifying the unseen currents that carry your desire into form. This is how alignment feels, calm, steady, and unwavering, even when the world seems contrary. This is where the miraculous unfolds. Help arrives from directions you did not plan, opportunities emerge from unexpected sources, and doors open just when you need them most. This is how Neville's students learn to move. Walking in faith while appearances fluctuated, knowing the outcome was already secured. This is where doubt loses its grip, because persistent faith strengthens the bridge from imagination to reality beyond the reach of logic. This is how the invisible becomes tangible, circumstances bending seamlessly to the frequency of your inner conviction. This is where courage solidifies, your reliance on faith outweighing fear and expectation outweighing worry. This is how the mind harmonizes with the universe, aligning thoughts, feelings, and intentions into a single creative force. This is where wealth ceases to feel precarious, because it is already woven into the fabric of your inner reality. This is how mastery begins, by trusting the unseen, maintaining assumption, and letting the invisible hand complete the design. And this is the moment you recognize that faith is not waiting for proof, but knowing that everything you imagined as real will inevitably emerge into the world. Picture for a moment the invisible current that flows from your heart and mind, the magnetic field of emotion Neville Goddard described as the true engine of manifestation, capable of drawing wealth, opportunity, and success without struggle. This is where creation shifts from thinking to feeling, because thought alone is empty until charged with the energy of emotion. This is where it begins, when you cultivate the inner sensation of already having what you desire, letting gratitude, joy, and confidence saturate your being. This is how it unfolds. People, ideas, and circumstances begin to move toward you naturally, drawn by the unmistakable signature of your emotional state. This is where truth breaks through, that the universe is not persuaded by arguments or logic, but responds directly to the vibrational frequency of your feelings. This is why it matters, because many imagine wealth intellectually, yet their emotions remain tied to fear, doubt, and scarcity, canceling the power of their imagination. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that external effort can replace internal resonance, when in truth, the energy of feeling commands the unseen into form. This is the turning point, when you commit to living in the emotional reality of abundance, allowing sensation to guide your perception of what is already yours. This is how wealth begins to appear. Through inspired action, serendipitous events, and opportunities aligned with the mood of certainty you maintain. This is where Neville's insight becomes practical, training the mind to hold a dominant feeling until the outer world conforms. This is how obstacles dissolve, because your magnetic field overwhelms contradictory evidence, making it irrelevant. This is where the law of attraction reveals itself, not as a theory, but as the natural response of the universe to a charged inner state. This is how persistence strengthens your field, each moment of consistent feeling amplifying your unseen influence. This is where the body and mind synchronize, every gesture, expression, and thought harmonizing with the wealth you have assumed. This is how miracles gather momentum, small alignments accumulating until the manifestation becomes undeniable. This is where doubt cannot intrude, because emotion has anchored the reality before evidence appears. This is how the mind becomes fertile ground, emotion planting seeds that will grow into tangible results. This is where the unseen begins to respond, the magnetic pull of inner conviction bending circumstances to your claim. This is how Neville's students mastered creation, by cultivating feeling as the invisible hand that commands events. And this is the moment you understand that emotion is the real currency of manifestation, that wealth is drawn not by force, but by the magnetic resonance of your inner state. Now consider this, the radical idea that wealth does not come from struggle, striving, or endless effort, but from a reversal of effort. The principle Neville Goddard revealed that shifts creation from doing to being. This is where true mastery begins, when you stop forcing results and start allowing the inner state to carry the outcome into form. This is where it begins, by realizing that persistent tension, worry, and labor are often signs that the mind is working against itself, not with the law of assumption. This is how it unfolds. When you rest in the feeling of having, outer circumstances begin to rearrange themselves as if by invisible hands doing the work for you. This is where truth breaks through. That effort is not the measure of productivity, But alignment is the measure of manifestation. This is why it matters. Because countless people exhaust themselves in pursuit of wealth, while the universe waits for them to simply inhabit the state of it. This is where illusion fades. The illusion that sweat, struggle, or relentless planning is the path to abundance, when the real path is inner assumption. This is the turning point, when you choose to act from confidence rather than desperation, from inspiration rather than fear. This is how wealth flows, through the effortless unfolding of events that naturally respond to the state you hold. This is where faith meets action. The quiet alignment of your imagination, emotion, and behavior, orchestrating outcomes without strain. This is how the invisible law operates, by responding to inner certainty more than external effort, bending the world to match your inner decree. This is where patience becomes strategic, knowing that a calm mind produces results faster than frantic exertion. This is how manifestation accelerates, because the universe moves in harmony with your inner state, not your to-do list. This is where courage deepens, allowing the law to operate while you remain steadfast in the assumed state. This is how old habits of struggle are replaced, with relaxed, confident action flowing from the certainty of having. This is where mastery reveals itself, not in doing more, but in doing less with perfect alignment. This is how creation becomes graceful, the energy of tension replaced by the power of inner certainty. This is where your mind and reality synchronize, the outer world reflecting the effortless authority of your inner being. This is how Neville's teaching transcends labor, showing that wealth is not the reward for work, but the natural fruit of assumed fulfillment. And this is the moment you recognize that the more you allow, the more wealth manifests, because effort reversed is faith expressed, and faith expressed becomes inevitable reality. Picture for a moment the subtle truth Neville Goddard revealed. Wealth is first owned in imagination before it ever appears in the world. And true ownership begins not with money in your hands, but with conviction in your consciousness. This is where the journey deepens, because to possess is to assume possession, and to assume is to command reality to conform. This is where it begins, by mentally inhabiting the state of already having, feeling the satisfaction, security, and freedom that come with it. This is how it unfolds. Your imagination becomes a rehearsal space, a studio where your desires are experienced as if complete, sending a signal to the universe that your claim is authentic. This is where truth breaks through, that no material acquisition can match the certainty and authority of mental ownership, because the mind sets the precedent the world must follow. This is why it matters, because most people wait for the outer world to verify their claim, while Neville teaches that inner assumption alone is sufficient. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that tangible possession creates reality, when in truth, reality first rises in the theater of consciousness. This is the turning point, when you begin living, thinking, and feeling as if every financial desire is already yours. This is how manifestation begins to accelerate, through consistent mental ownership that aligns emotion, thought, and expectation. This is where the law of assumption shows its elegance. Outer circumstances adjust seamlessly to the dominant state held within. This is how confidence anchors, because inner ownership removes doubt and preempts worry. This is where creative power magnifies. Each imagined scene of abundance strengthens the bridge to physical reality. This is how opportunities multiply. People, ideas, and situations naturally respond to the magnetic authority of your inner claim. This is where patience transforms into trust, the quiet knowing that what is already possessed in consciousness must manifest in time. This is how old scarcity patterns dissolve. Mental ownership displaces hesitation, fear, and limitation. This is where mastery reveals itself, not in acquiring more, but in holding firmly what is assumed within. This is how Neville's students experience true freedom, the realization that wealth is not delivered, it is recognized within. This is where your inner state becomes your most valuable asset, holding unshakable dominion over unseen forces. This is how manifestation becomes inevitable, because the universe cannot deny what has already been claimed in imagination. And this is the moment you grasp the secret. To be wealthy is first to be wealth, to own it inwardly, and to allow the outer world to reflect what your mind has already possessed. Envision a world where money is not merely currency, but an expression of creative life itself, a spiritual energy flowing through every mind and circumstance, as Neville Goddard taught. This is where the perspective transforms, from seeing wealth as external gain to recognizing it as an inner alignment with divine creative power. This is where it begins, when you stop worshiping money and start understanding it as a reflection of your state of consciousness. This is how it unfolds. Every thought of lack becomes a misalignment. Every feeling of abundance a harmonious vibration attracting corresponding opportunities. This is where truth breaks through. That financial wealth and spiritual fulfillment are inseparable, because the outer is always a mirror of the inner. This is why it matters, because many people chase riches while starving their inner world, missing the profound connection that turns money into a tool of growth and freedom. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that spirituality demands sacrifice of wealth or that wealth compromises spiritual integrity. This is the turning point, when you realize that money, when imagined and felt correctly, becomes a sacred extension of creative power. This is how wealth serves. You no longer pursue it blindly, but channel it consciously as a manifestation of your alignment with divine consciousness. This is where intention guides circulation. Every transaction, every expenditure, every investment becomes a conscious act of creation. This is how gratitude amplifies abundance, the recognition that money is energy responding to the resonance of your inner state. This is where generosity and reception merge, giving and receiving becoming natural expressions of one unified creative law. This is how prosperity becomes effortless, because you treat money not as a goal, but as a reflection of the inner reality you maintain. This is where scarcity dissolves. Fear and lack no longer hold dominion over your consciousness. This is how Neville's wisdom illuminates finance, as a spiritual practice of assumption, feeling, and aligned action. This is where inner peace and outer wealth converge, the state of mind harmonizing with the flow of life. This is how abundance flows naturally, because energy always moves toward congruence with consciousness. This is where mastery reveals itself, not in hoarding, but in consciously participating in the circulation of creation. This is how true fulfillment is realized. Wealth becoming a mirror of spiritual clarity and imaginative power. And this is the moment you understand that money is not separate from the divine. It is the visible pulse of your unseen creative life, and by aligning your consciousness, you become both the source and the receiver of infinite abundance. Can you imagine finally witnessing the undeniable evidence that Neville Goddard promised, that wealth is not wishful thinking, but a law that always responds to your inner state? This is where theory becomes proof, and imagination begins to write its story in the physical world. This is where it begins, when small, subtle manifestations start appearing, a call at the perfect time, an unexpected gift, an opportunity that perfectly matches your vision. This is how it unfolds, each experience reinforcing the reality of your assumption, strengthening conviction, and dissolving doubt. This is where truth breaks through, that the law of imagination is not mystical, it is demonstrable, repeatable, and precise. This is why it matters, because once you witness results, you no longer need to debate or hope, you know. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that wealth is random or reserved for the fortunate few. This is the turning point, when every event in your life becomes a confirmation of the state you have assumed. This is how your confidence grows, because repeated experience proves that inner assumption directly causes outer manifestation. This is where patience is rewarded. Minor successes accumulate, signaling the universe's consistent response to your inner authority. This is how Neville's students validated his teaching, by tracking evidence from imagination to reality, seeing each mental act materialize in sequence. This is where resistance diminishes, because experience eliminates fear and strengthens trust. This is how inspiration becomes action. Proof emboldens creativity, allowing you to take steps aligned with your assumed state. This is where your imagination is honored, the outer world reflecting the fidelity of your inner vision. This is how wealth solidifies, not suddenly, but through cumulative evidence that reinforces your authority over circumstances. This is where persistence meets reward, continuing to assume despite appearances, knowing results are inevitable. This is how the unseen becomes tangible. each proof creating momentum for further manifestations. This is where mastery is built, through consistent validation that inner reality governs the outer. This is how faith transforms into certainty, doubt replaced by the irrefutable evidence of your own experience. And this is the moment you realize that proof is not external. It emerges naturally when imagination, feeling, and assumption converge, turning every experience into a living demonstration of your creative power. Now consider this, the paradoxical secret Neville Goddard taught. To fully manifest wealth, you must both desire it passionately and release all anxious attachment to its arrival. This is where true mastery begins, because the universe responds not to desperation, but to relaxed certainty. This is where it begins, when you cultivate a state of inner satisfaction, knowing that what you assume as real will manifest in perfect timing. This is how it unfolds, by holding your vision with unwavering belief, while letting go of the need to control every step or outcome. This is where truth breaks through. That detachment does not weaken your claim, it strengthens it, allowing the law of assumption to operate without resistance. This is why it matters, because tension and obsession create friction that delays the manifestation of your desires. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that clinging to results accelerates success, when in reality, trust accelerates it. This is the turning point, when you replace worry with confidence, fear with faith, and impatience with calm expectancy. This is how wealth flows effortlessly, because you no longer block it with doubt, fear, or over-effort. This is where Neville's principle shines, allowing the inner state to dominate outer appearances without interference. This is how the unseen aligns, by creating space for inspired ideas, timely opportunities, and supportive connections to appear naturally. This is where patience becomes your ally, each moment of calm reinforcing the certainty of fulfillment. This is how inner joy fuels manifestation, because your emotional state sets the rhythm the world must follow. This is where the magnetic pull strengthens, detachment amplifying the power of your assumption rather than diminishing it. This is how subtle guidance reaches you, through intuition, insights, and moments of clarity that arrive when the mind is still. This is where resistance dissipates, the desire remains, but the struggle disappears. This is how Neville's students mastered the paradox, living in desire fully, yet releasing all tension about its timing. This is where creation becomes graceful, unforced, natural, and harmonious with life itself. This is how true abundance is sustained, because detachment allows the law to work perfectly, uninterrupted. And this is the moment you realize that letting go is not giving up, but stepping into a higher state of alignment where wealth flows to you effortlessly, as if drawn by the invisible hand of your calm and confident consciousness. Envision a life where every day, every thought, and every feeling compounds, building unstoppable momentum toward the wealth you have assumed, as Neville Goddard taught through the discipline of consistent inner practice. This is where small, repeated acts of assumption accumulate into undeniable results, proving that manifestation is a process, not a single event. This is where it begins, when you decide to live daily in the state of already having what you desire, without wavering for even a moment. This is how it unfolds. Each repetition strengthens conviction, aligns emotions, and reinforces the bridge from imagination to reality. This is where truth breaks through, that the universe honors persistence and steady belief far more than sporadic bursts of enthusiasm. This is why it matters, because inconsistency invites doubt, weakens authority, and delays the unfolding of abundance. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that one dramatic visualization or rare moment of feeling will suffice, when in truth, mastery is earned through daily, unwavering attention to the inner state. This is the turning point, when you embrace the power of habit, letting assumption become as natural as breathing. This is how wealth flows steadily, opportunities, ideas, and circumstances aligning like clockwork to the rhythm of your sustained inner state. This is where Neville's teaching becomes practical, showing that repetition is not redundancy, but reinforcement of your creative claim. This is how resistance is neutralized, because consistent assumption leaves no space for doubt or conflicting belief to survive. This is how confidence solidifies, each consistent day proving to you that the law is reliable and obedient. This is where patience gains strength, Because momentum in consciousness translates to momentum in reality. This is how manifestation scales. Small victories compound into larger, visible results. This is where your mind and imagination synchronize, habits of thought and feeling merging into a coherent creative force. This is how mastery emerges, not suddenly, but as a natural consequence of faithful repetition. This is where the unseen works tirelessly on your behalf, guided by the constancy of your inner assumption. This is how wealth becomes habitual, no longer dependent on external fluctuations, but a natural expression of your inner state. And this is the moment you recognize that consistent inner practice is the engine that drives every manifestation. And by showing up daily in the state of fulfilled desire, you create unstoppable momentum toward the abundance that is already yours. Think of the moment when imagination, feeling, and faith converge so completely that the outer world can no longer resist reflecting the reality you have long assumed, as Neville Goddard promised. This is where the invisible becomes visible, where the blueprint held within your consciousness finally manifests in tangible form. This is where it begins, when you awaken to the subtle signs that your vision is already taking shape. The right people, circumstances, and resources aligning naturally. This is how it unfolds, each event, opportunity, and encounter serving as confirmation that your assumption is effective and undeniable. This is where truth breaks through, that manifestation is not the result of chance, luck, or effort, but the consistent expression of a chosen inner state. This is why it matters, because recognition of fulfillment reinforces belief, strengthens confidence, and solidifies the magnetic pull of consciousness. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that wealth is still distant or uncertain, replaced by the undeniable evidence of reality obeying your imagination. This is the turning point, when satisfaction replaces yearning, and the state of having no longer depends on external proof. This is how abundance becomes effortless, the world now responding naturally to the state of mind you have nurtured without strain. This is where Neville's students saw results, seeing long-held desires materialize in ways that seemed miraculous, yet were perfectly natural to the law. This is how momentum completes its arc, your sustained assumption rippling outward until it reaches visible culmination. This is how joy amplifies manifestation, because recognition of your vision fulfilled intensifies the inner state that drew it forth. This is where gratitude cements reality, acknowledging that the wealth now present is the fruit of your disciplined inner work. This is how mastery is confirmed, through consistent alignment producing the desired effect with clarity and ease. This is where confidence becomes absolute, proof replacing doubt, and knowing replacing hope. This is how the world aligns perfectly with your inner world, every outer sign echoing your imagined state. This is where the unseen law works flawlessly. Faith, feeling, and assumption orchestrating reality with precision. This is how fulfillment feels. Complete, satisfying, and naturally extending beyond imagination. This is where Neville's teaching reaches its pinnacle, showing that the outer world is a faithful reflection of the inner vision. And this is the moment you fully grasp that wealth is not earned, found, or waited for, but realized and claimed through the unwavering assumption of its reality, already present within your consciousness. Consider the possibility that the power Neville Goddard taught is not limited to a single lifetime or a single desire, but is the very blueprint for all creation, a legacy of mastery that continues to unfold whenever imagination and faith are applied. This is where the story culminates, when you realize that manifesting wealth is not merely about money, but about learning to operate consciously as the architect of your reality. This is where it begins, by acknowledging that every thought, feeling, and assumption carries creative authority, capable of shaping circumstances, influencing outcomes, and leaving a mark on the world. This is how it unfolds. Through repeated, faithful application of assumption, you create a life that reflects the full spectrum of your inner vision, and in doing so, you inspire others to recognize their own creative power. This is where truth breaks through, that the law Neville revealed is universal, timeless, and unerring, responding only to the fidelity of your inner state. This is why it matters, because mastery of imagination empowers you to transform limitations into opportunity, lack into abundance, and dreams into tangible reality. This is where illusion fades, the illusion that life is shaped solely by circumstances, when in truth, everything you see, touch, and experience is drawn from the assumption you maintain. This is the turning point, when you accept full responsibility for your reality, recognizing yourself as the source of both creation and fulfillment. This is how legacy is built, through consistent inner practice, unshakable belief, and the courage to live from the state of already having. This is where Neville's wisdom endures, teaching that imagination is not idle fantasy, but the engine of reality itself. This is how wealth, influence, and freedom converge, through alignment of thought, feeling, and expectation with the desired end. This is where empowerment takes root, because knowing that you are the creator of your world dissolves fear, doubt, and dependence on others. This is how miracles accumulate, each success confirming your authority, each manifestation reinforcing your inner lawfulness. This is where your story expands. The patterns you establish ripple outward, influencing not only your own life but the consciousness of those around you. This is how inner confidence becomes unshakable, proof, experience, and persistent assumption merging into certainty. This is where the unseen responds flawlessly, obedient to the clarity and constancy of your creative mind. This is how mastery transforms identity. You no longer see yourself as separate from abundance, but as its natural expression. This is where the world reflects the state within, circumstances, people, and wealth, all bending to the resonance of your inner assumption. This is how Neville's teachings become a living legacy, guiding you to understand that wealth is first imagined, faithfully assumed, and inevitably realized. And this is the moment you realize that your life itself becomes the proof, the demonstration, and the inheritance of creative mastery, leaving behind a legacy not of money alone, but of conscious, empowered creation that flows through time and touches all who observe and follow.